Once upon a time, there was a small town nestled in the middle of nowhere. The town was called Ravenwood, and it had a dark history that nobody liked to talk about. The people who lived there had been plagued by misfortune for generations, and it was said that the town was cursed. Despite the rumors, a young couple named Jack and Emily decided to move to Ravenwood. They were both drawn to the town's quiet and peaceful nature, and the promise of starting a new life was too tempting to resist. However, as soon as they arrived, strange things began to happen. At first, it was just little things, objects moving on their own, strange noises in the middle of the night. But as time went on, the occurrences became more and more frequent and much more sinister. One day, while walking through the town, Jack and Emily stumbled upon an old abandoned house. The house was said to be the home of a witch who had been burned at the stake many years ago. The couple, being skeptics, decided to investigate. As soon as they stepped inside the house, they felt a chill run down their spines. It was as if the house was alive and watching them. Suddenly, they heard a voice whisper, "Get out!" Emily grabbed Jack's hand and they tried to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. They were trapped. As they turned around, they saw the ghostly figure of the witch hovering in front of them. Her eyes were cold and menacing as she warned them to leave before it was too late. The couple tried to leave, but the witch's curse had already taken hold. They were doomed to experience the same misfortunes that had plagued the town's residents for generations. They soon discovered that the curse was not limited to the house or the town, but it had spread throughout the entire surrounding area. Anybody who entered Ravenwood would be doomed to suffer the same fate as its residents. Jack and Emily realized that they had made a grave mistake by moving to Ravenwood. They had unknowingly walked into a trap that would keep them there for the rest of their lives. The couple never managed to escape Ravenwood. They remained trapped in the cursed town, doomed to suffer the same fate as its residents before them. And so, the legend of the cursed town of Ravenwood lived on, and anyone who heard the story would think twice before ever setting foot inside its borders. It was a hot summer night, and the city was bustling with activity. People were out enjoying the evening, and the streets were alive with music and laughter. But all of a sudden, the power went out, leaving the city shrouded in darkness. At first, people were annoyed and confused. But as the minutes turned into hours, their confusion turned into fear. Something was wrong. Something was coming. And then they heard it. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from all around them. It was followed by a chorus of screams and cries for help. The people were trapped, unable to see their surroundings or escape the approaching danger. As the night wore on, the sounds grew louder and more frenzied. The air was thick with the stench of fear and sweat. The city was under attack. But by what? The first reports came in the morning, but they were confusing and contradictory. Some said it was a pack of wild dogs, others that it was a group of escaped prisoners. But as the hours passed, the truth became clear. It was something that had been lurking in the shadows all along, something that only came out when the lights went out. The creature was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. It was massive, with eyes that glowed in the dark and razor-sharp claws that could tear through steel. It was relentless, pursuing its prey through the city streets with a single-minded purpose. The people were powerless against it. The police and army were no match for its speed and strength. It seemed as if there was no hope for the city. But then, a small group of survivors banded together. They were determined to fight back, to take a stand against the darkness that had consumed their world. They armed themselves with whatever they could find, from kitchen knives to crowbars, and they began to fight. It was a long and grueling battle. The creature seemed unstoppable, but the survivors refused to give up. They fought with every ounce of strength they had, pushing themselves to the brink of exhaustion. And finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they emerged victorious. The creature lay dead at their feet, its glowing eyes finally extinguished. The city was left in ruins, But the survivors knew that they had done what they had to do. They had faced their fears and triumphed over the darkness that had threatened to consume them. As the lights flickered back on and the world came back into view, the survivors looked at each other and nodded. They had been through hell, but they had come out the other side, and they knew that they would never forget the horrors of that long, dark night, the night that the city went dark and the creatures of the shadows came out to play. Mary always thought that her new apartment was a great deal, but as soon as she moved in, strange things began to happen. Every night, Mary would wake up to the feeling of being watched, but she could never see anything in the darkness. It was as if a dark entity was hovering over her. Soon, the entity started to manifest itself as a shadowy figure. It would stand at the edge of Mary's bed, watching her with its glowing red eyes. She could feel its presence all around her, suffocating and overwhelming. Mary tried to ignore the entity, but it would not leave her alone. It followed her everywhere she went, even outside of her apartment. She tried to seek help from her friends and family, but no one believed her. They thought she was going crazy. One night, as Mary lay in bed, the entity became more aggressive. It started to crawl onto her bed, and she could feel its cold breath on her face. Mary tried to scream, but her voice was lost in her throat. She felt as if the entity was suffocating her. As Mary's vision began to blur, she remembered something her grandmother had told her about the entity. Her grandmother had said that the entity could only exist if Mary believed in it. With all her strength, Mary pushed the entity away and told herself that it wasn't real. The entity disappeared in a flash of darkness, and Mary was left gasping for breath. She knew that she had to leave the apartment immediately. As she packed her bags, she noticed that the entity had left something behind. A piece of paper with strange writing on it. Mary did not understand what the writing said, but she knew that it was a warning. She took the paper with her and left the apartment for good. Years later, Mary still could not explain what had happened to her. She never experienced the presence of the entity again, but she knew that it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. Mary realized that she had been lucky to survive, but she also knew that others might not be as fortunate. She decided to use the piece of paper that the entity had left behind to warn others about its existence. Mary started to research the writing and discovered that it was a spell to summon the entity. She knew that she had to destroy the paper to prevent others from falling victim to the entity's terror. Mary gathered all her courage and burned the paper, watching as the writing turned to ashes. She knew that the entity would be angry, but she was determined to protect others from its grasp. As the ashes blew away in the wind, Mary felt a sense of relief wash over her. She knew that the entity was gone for good. She had defeated it with her willpower and determination. From that day forward, Mary made it her mission to help others who had experienced similar hauntings. She knew that the dark entity was out there, waiting for its next victim, but she was ready to face it. Mary had won the battle against the entity and emerged stronger for it.